Welcome to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast. I'm your host, Kojo Bafum, and this podcast is an extension of my book, also called Listen to Your Footsteps, which is a collection of essays, reflections, and poetry on things like fatherhood, identity and belonging, growing up, creativity, and the lessons learned. The purpose of this podcast is to gain insight and learn from the journeys that others have taken. I explore the worlds of art, culture, design, business, creativity, and life from the perspective of Africans who are contributing to the redefinition of the continent and who we are. So my guest for this episode is somebody that I met randomly at dinner at my house. My wife had met her at an event, and she was with somebody that I've been following and interacting with for some years, a gentleman called Blinky Bill. So my guest is a Kenyan. She has a lot of titles after her name, actress, singer, songwriter, radio and TV personality. It's Patricia Kihoro. How are you, Patricia?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. So you were just complaining before we started that you're tired. And I was saying, when one looks at your life, it feels like you're doing a lot.
I know, and this is me trying to take a break from stuff. I'm just like, wow, what a break. What a break. It's really not a break. And I think I'm going to have to maybe possibly get rid of all my devices so that nobody can get in touch with me, so that I can actually just not do anything for a while.
Why were you wanting to take a break?
Because I haven't ever been able to take a break. I genuinely have not taken a break in decades. A genuine break where I don't have to think about being on, creating or responding to something or somebody or working on something. So even when I travel, usually it's because, I've traveled for something, for an event, for something. And I haven't taken a vacation that I didn't have my laptop with me, taking meetings or still working on something, just genuinely switching off and being able to not think about anything. I don't remember the last time I was able to do that.
I mean, it is interesting because that's, in a weird way, the world that we've created. I think all of us are starting to realize that there are certain things, people with normal jobs take leave, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But because we're working, we work in a space where there's just so much going on, and you're always having to kind of move in different spaces and different people and different interactions, and you have the tools at your disposal. You're always working.
Yeah, you're always on, switched on. And it can be exhausting. You can burn out because you're not even giving yourself time to rest. Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning, where it all began. So what is the thing that you wanted to do when you grew up? So 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old Patricia.
Oh, so I wanted to sing and I wanted to act. That's as far back as I remember. I wanted to sing and I wanted to be an actress. And then, things kept shifting because I feel it's something that is something about me, is that my attention shifts from one thing to another very quickly. So over the years, I then was like, I think I want to be a lawyer. And then, I think I want to be a pilot. And then I think I want to be a physiotherapist. And these are things that I genuinely, honestly wanted to delve into. And I would focus my attention on them and start doing the research about what it would take to make it happen. And then my attention shifts again. I think I want to get into advertising. And I think advertising is the thing that I spent the most time actually delving into. After high school, I remember my mom was able to reach out to a friend of hers who worked at an ad agency. And so I went and pled my case, and I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks, just, an internship where I was shadowing them and seeing what goes into the world of advertising. And then I ended up staying there for about 8 months before I went to uni. Before I went to do a 6-month graphic design course. And then I went to uni after that and studied psychology. Mhm.
I mean, you grew up in Nairobi, right?
Yes, I grew up in Nairobi, Kenya. I was born and raised
Born and
there.
raised.
Hmm.
What So what was home like? Because you're describing you're describing what feels like the kind of space that allowed you to go and try all these different things, or at least explore and figure out which it was that you wanted to do.
Hmm.
And I asked that coming from perhaps a generation where there was less leeway to
Hmm.
figure stuff out,
Hmm.
um, as well as simply like awareness around the potential careers that actually exist.
Right. I think, yeah, I grew up, first of all, my parents were younger than most of my peers' parents.
Mm,
So they weren't in the conventional careers. They weren't doctors or teachers or bankers. My dad is in hospitality, so hotel management, and my mom is in tourism. So I think they already, just by virtue of them being in these careers that were not necessarily the mainstream, um, this is what our parents do, and they expect us to delve into that.
yeah,
So I think they kind of just allowed they allowed me and my younger brothers, I've got two younger brothers, to also just see what else is there outside of what a lot of people were sort of told this is where
yeah,
you're going to go. Right. And then because my folks were also a bit younger than most, I felt like they were a bit more liberal. And, I tell folks that I never had a curfew. Um, and to the point where my folks, the first time I ever had a drink was with my parents. And for a while there, even in like, as I grew into an adult, I couldn't drink if my folks were not around. Like I could only trust myself to have a drink if I was with my
mm,
parents, because I feel like they sort of allowed us to just live and experience life and see what life is for ourselves. I grew up it was pretty like middle class. We weren't wealthy. Um, we lived in an estate called Buruburu. So for people who know Buruburu in Kenya, it's like pretty middle class.
yeah,
And but then we had the privilege of being comfortable, right? So we went to public school, but we went to a good school. The public schools here are really great. And, you know, we we had the privilege of being comfortable.
yeah,
Yeah. So I think that's what also allowed us to not feel like this pressure to find jobs so that we can so that we can survive. I think my folks, even though they kind of like scraped to get us through school, I had wanted to, because now when I wanted to go to uni, I used to think, oh, I'd love to go to Berkeley because one of the musicians that I really admired went to Berkeley.
mm,
But then my folks couldn't afford that. And then eventually I was like, okay, then I'll go to USIU, which is a United States International University here. But by the time I was ready to go to uni, my folks couldn't afford that. So, you know, we also had to kind of like make some sacrifices. So I ended up going to a public university which had subsidized rates because that's what my folks could afford. So even the graphic design school, my mom really had to like, look for the money to let me go and find a payment plan to allow me to go and do that because I'd expressed my interest. So I'm really grateful because I knew my folks really did what they could to make sure that we could sort of explore the things that we wanted to. Yeah.
this is something that's recurring with when I talk to people because it's kind of also part of my journey. It's the beauty of reaching a particular age
Hmm.
where you start to see your parents in a slightly different light. Because most of us, when we're growing up, um, there's always tension or conflict, right? Um, well, I guess for most of us, at various stages, at some stage, there's kind of as you're coming into yourself and you're trying to figure yourself out. But there's a beauty in kind of reaching a particular age where you can look back with less teenage anxiety or rebelliousness,
Yeah.
And just recognize recognize your parents for, I guess, who they are,
Yeah.
two people who or a person who did the best that they could
Hmm.
in the circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to see them as human beings, just like you are. Um, which is when that shifts, it's such an interesting shift because you start to I start to relate to my folks as human beings, as people that I can have a conversation with, and to see that they they're still grappling with some of the things I'm grappling with now. And I still feel like the kid I was 20 years ago. So I can't imagine because I'm 36 now. By the time my folks were in their 30s, they had had all three of us kids, right? And I'm just like, if I had three children right now, I don't even know if I'd know what to do. I feel like I'm still a kid. I can't even imagine having my first kid. So yeah, they really just were winging it as well because life doesn't come with a manual. So they really did the best that
Absolutely.
they could. Yeah.
In psychology, how'd you end up in psychology? I mean, so advertising, graphic design, it's kind of like the
Mhm.
same area. The
Mhm.
singing, etc., is kind of same area, and then psychology feels like it's over there.
Yeah. So with public uni here, when you're in high school, in your last year of high school, you kind of you make your selections about the courses that you want to do, and you make four selections, right? So if you qualify for the first option that you take, then you're going to go to the uni that offers that option, right? So things like medicine, law, um, and when I was selecting the unis, like the courses that I was going to do, I didn't think of it. I knew I was going to go to Berkeley, right?
Mm.
So I just did it because it was something we had to do. So the options that I put there were probably law and then medicine. And then I thought, what did my dad do? Hotel management, so hospitality. So I put that in. And then I was like, and my mom did tourism. So I put that in. But when I got my results from high school, I had performed fairly okay, but I didn't qualify for law or med school, right? So the next course was hospitality um, and management. And that was in a university in Eldoret, which is maybe 5 hours out of Nairobi.
Mm.
And so so you're called, right? They say you're called to this university because that's just like in high school, you're called to this high school. So because it's public, you kind of go where the position is. So I remember my mom telling me, yeah, you're gonna go there because that's what we can afford. And I was like, you are kidding me. I'm not going to Eldoret to study hotel management. I don't even want to do that. And she's like, well, you're gonna get a university degree, and this is the only option you have. And you must have a degree. So when I went to the school, one, I didn't like the campus where hotel management was being offered. And then also, I had auditioned for a musical play and had gotten the part. So this was September of 2004. And I remember then going to the main campus and thinking, okay, this looks like a school. This looks like a university. And then we figured out how to change courses. And I made a selection out of the courses that were going to start in January of 2005. And while I was looking through the courses that I qualified for, psychology was one of them, right, in the School of Social Sciences. And because I still hadn't figured out what I wanted to study, because for a really long time, music had been the thing, there was no music offered at this school. So the next best option for me among the courses that I had qualified for was psychology, because I thought psychology is the study of human behavior. If anything, I think it would be good to understand human behavior, and that would probably serve me wherever I end up. And then it just so happened that the course was also starting in January. So I could apply for that and then go back to Nairobi so that I could take part in the musical play. So that's how I ended up doing psychology. It was just circumstances, timing, and where I was in terms of I still haven't figured out what I want to study. Mm.
Well, some would say it's what's serendipity, right?
Yeah.
Because like you're saying, I mean, psychology does have it in its own way kind of can serve as a foundation
Mhm.
for anything that we do as human beings. In
Yeah,
terms of understanding others, but not only that, understanding ourselves.
exactly. I think what psychology did for me in the study of psychology is just learning to ask the right questions and to listen. Because for me, I approach the world and I go into the world with curiosity. And so asking the right questions about what motivates the people around me or the people that I meet, I think psychology really gave me the tools to be able to do that. So it serves me in everything that I've ended up doing since I studied it. Whether it's, radio conversations and interviews, whether it's the roles that I play when I'm acting, whether it's, conversations with people, um, pretty much anything and everything, the content that I create. Because at that point, I was also thinking about consumer psychology and advertising and how they sort of relate with each other, like what motivates people to buy the things that they do. And that has served me well, I think.
Yeah, it's all connected. I mean, I'm thinking you said you did graphic design, like
Mhm.
all of those things. Yeah, I guess all of those things kind of speak to that. And
Yeah,
like you're saying, I think even just being able to listen is an important one, particularly when like interviewing people is an art form that I think many of us will spend a lifetime trying to figure out how to get right.
yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, with the graphic design, how that then served me is when I was doing my radio show and hosting the events that I would, I designed all my posters, like anything that you saw online that was, a poster, a flyer, anything of that sort. I would do that myself. So I ended up being able to be self-sufficient because I had the skills and the tools to sort of support everything that I did. Mm.
The music thing, so was something that you always kind of did. How did that manifest in your life? Kind of, let's say, through high school and beyond.
So I would sing in high school. I remember I did start. I was part of the music class in high school when I joined, but because of the way the subject clusters were, formulated, I was good at physics, and they needed to fill a quota for the physics class
Wow.
so that because schools are also like they also compete against each other. So this school, the physics class, the chemistry class, so the aggregate grade is what sort of would allow schools are graded. So when
Yeah.
the results come out, there's the top school and then the second and the third. So they needed the top students doing the right subject so that the mean grade can place you higher when the results come out. So because I was good at physics and music didn't go together. And I remember being so upset when I was selected to do physics because I wanted to do music. But
Yeah.
now the physics class, you could only do subjects like agriculture or home science. And I was just like, I don't want to do home science and I don't want to do agriculture. I don't want to be a farmer. I want to do music. I tried to get my mom to come to the school to speak to the deputy head teacher so that I could be allowed to do music. But I think they just convinced my mom about the job market. What is she going to do with music? Singers don't, so I remember my mom then coming to tell me, just do the physics. So I ended up doing physics and agriculture, but I completely switched off. I was a bright student when I was in primary school, but in high school, because they made me do stuff that I didn't want to do, I kind
Mm.
of switched off. I wouldn't study. I kind of just was out of it. So luckily I performed okay in the exams. And by okay, I think I got a B plus in the final exams. But had I applied myself, I probably would have performed much better. But I just was so out of it because it felt so unfair. I was like, wait, but am I not supposed to do the thing that I want to do?
I'm just
That I'm,
thinking like
yeah.
the way you just dropped. So I was good at physics, right?
Mhm.
And and for me, it's just like you say it so nonchalantly, and physics was one of the subjects that I battled through, and I'm like I'm looking at it and going kind of physics and music, And now that I'm older, I see a connection between the two because, we read all this random stuff. But yeah, I'm just trying to imagine you navigating a space where it's like, yeah, look, I can sing and I can do music and I can do physics. And
Yeah, and I didn't even like
it
physics.
makes sense.
I didn't like it, but I was good at math. I was good at physics. I didn't like chemistry at all, but I then had to do it. And yeah, it's interesting now that you say that. I said it so nonchalantly, but I'm somebody who loves to figure stuff out, and I can really study something if I don't have to do an exam for it. Like, I don't like to be told that I have to do something or I should do something. I want to do something because I want to. So even after high school, I remember I was trying to learn how to play the guitar. And in the way that I was learning it was very math based. I remember having a book where I was doing calculations about why this note sounds like this in relation to the frets and and how the guitar is designed. I started to calculate, okay, great. So this is why this chord sounds like this. And it was very physics based, but this was now after high school when I didn't have to do the physics.
Yeah.
So I could just like try and figure it out. And in hindsight, now when I'm interested in something, I will learn everything that I can about it. But then on the flip side, once I lose interest, it's done, which is an ADHD thing, which I was diagnosed with last year. So it kind of all makes sense now. How I navigated life in my childhood, my teenagehood, my uni days, and my adulthood. But those are things I'm learning about myself now, that I don't like to be told to do stuff or that I have to. I want to do stuff on my own. And if I want to do it myself, I will. I can study. In hindsight, I hated to study when I was in high school and uni, but now I will study on my own because I want to learn about something.
Would you say that kind of how, whether consciously or unconsciously, how you've developed, let's say, your professional life, or how you've crafted, because it does feel like you've crafted a professional life for you. I don't want to use the word career because somebody was asking me recently, do I have a career? And I'm like, actually, I don't. I kind of do the things that make sense right now, because what I'm focused on is the life that I'm looking to live, as opposed to following any type of career path. But it does feel like you've curated or crafted this professional life. And like you're saying, maybe with hindsight, it's understanding that, something like ADHD, this is how it manifested. And fortunately, you've been able to manifest something that does make sense. Because for others, I know a couple of people who have been diagnosed quite late in life, and they're not always as functional.
Right. I don't think I've deliberately crafted or curated this life. I think I kind of did the same thing that you did. It's just I did the thing that made sense at the time. And I see the privilege that I've had in being able to do that. Right. Because as a creative, not very, like, the creative industry is not necessarily one of the most financially fulfilling, or hadn't been. Right. So luckily, I was able to do things that I loved, that made sense at the time, that were also able to pay my bills. So it's not something that I planned and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And then in 2 years, I'm going to do this. And then it's going to make sense, because it really, honestly, was just doing the things that made sense at the time.
You are listening to the Listen to Your Footsteps podcast, a podcast in which I chat to Africans from a cross-section of society and sectors, including art, culture, design, business, and creativity, to name a few. I delve into their journeys, the decisions they've taken to get to where they are, how they do what they do, and everything in between. Essentially, we go wherever the conversation takes us. So one of my favorite quotes is by Steve Jobs, to paraphrase, where he says, "You can only connect the dots looking backwards." So I want you to connect the dots for me. So you come out of uni. You have the music thing.
Mm-hmm.
What are what are those when we're looking back? What are those steps along the way? Like I know that you entered, was it the Tusker
Project
uh,
Fame.
Project Fame, and a very good friend of mine and brother was involved in it in some stage, and then he passed away. A South African guy called Gerard.
Mm.
But connect the dots for us, kind of looking back
Yo.
in terms of how how today we're sitting having this conversation, and you're Patricia, the person who does all of these different things.
The dots are many, but let's see. Okay, so I get out of high school. Um, wow. I get out of high school. I am interested in advertising. I know that for sure because I used to like really be obsessed with ads from a really young age on TV. So I get out of high school. I travel out of the country for a bit with this organization that I was a part of while I was in high school. So I went to the US and I got a glimpse of the kinds of ads that they would run, which were so fantastic to me. I was just like, it's so different from what we have back home. They're creative, they're telling stories. So when I came back, that's when I had the conversation with my mom about being interested in advertising. And then she reached out to a friend of hers and she just told me, go here to this office, you plead your case on your own. So I got into advertising. What was supposed to be a 2-week internship became 8 months of also understanding that yes, there's the account service and the client service aspect of advertising, but I'm more interested in the creative side because I spent a lot of time in the creative studio. So I then decided I would study graphic design, which is what I did when I spoke to the guys in the studio and they told me about the best place to study graphic design in Nairobi, told my mom about it. She did what she could to pay for me to go study graphic design for 6 months. But then when I was called to uni, she insisted, you have to go to uni though, you have to get your degree. So I went to uni, did the thing where I'd auditioned for this musical play because of a guy that I liked. And he was like, oh, let's go do this thing. Got into the musical play. And that's when I was like, oh, there's a whole world of musical theater that allows me to sing and be on stage and whatnot. So when I finally did go into uni after doing that musical play, um, every time I would come home for the holidays, I would find something musical to do. So whether it's auditioning for the next musical play or a friend of mine having a friend who was a producer producing for a girl. And then I would go into studio to do the ad libs for the girl because she wasn't good at doing ad libs, but I could ad lib for days. So started getting in touch with people in, the musical side of the industry. Then I started doing jingles and voiceovers. So while I was in uni studying psychology, I'm also on the side making money from, musical theater or doing jingles. And so I started earning a living. And by the time I finished uni, I had to do my internship at a what's it called? At a mental institution, which full circle. I ended up going there for treatment and my diagnosis. But I completely understood while I was doing my internship and treating patients and having sessions and creating treatment plans for the patients that I was seeing that, okay, I know for sure counseling psychology is not the thing I want to do. I do want to do consumer psychology, but it's not offered in the country. But then, I've understood spending time in an ad agency, going back there for my internship as well. In my third year, I went back to the same ad agency for my internship. And then I did the internship at a mental institution. So I remember also finding work at a call center immediately after I finished my internship at the mental institution. And while I was at the call center, I joined a band. And while I was singing in the band, the first gig we ever did, somebody approached me and asked me, do you act? And I said, yeah. Can you come for an audition for a TV show? I was like, sure thing. I went to audition for the TV show, got the part, quit the call center. then I was singing in this band, a live band that was actually, so this artist called Nazizi, she was one of the first artists to sort of separate herself from using playback music. So she had a live band,
Okay.
which was us guys. So whenever she's performing, we're backing her, but then we'd also have our own gigs independently. It was called the Rude Boys Band. So I remember working at the call center overnight, and then in the morning, when my shift would be from 10 to 10, then 10 a.m., I'm going all the way to Nazizi's house, which was a 2 hour like bus ride, rehearse with the band, go home, sleep from 4, wake up at 9, get ready, go back to work. And so I was doing this, and then when I got the TV gig, I quit the call center gig, and then I was singing in the band while shooting season 1 of this TV show. It was called Changes for DSTV. Ended up doing 3 seasons of that, but after the first season is when I auditioned for Tasker Project Fame. Got through. I was one of the finalists. I was there till the very end. And then because of Project Fame, that's when now people also recognized me or saw me now publicly as a singer. So I'd start performing gigs, shooting season 2. And this is now how I got into the entertainment industry. And then, so I started, so I'm performing. I left the band. The band kind of disbanded. And then now I'm a fully fledged, artist and actress. This was 2010. So 2010 going into 2011. Also had friends, in the industry. So because I'm an actress, I would also be called upon to be in my friends' music videos. I was a part of one of the first viral music videos in Kenya, which was just a band's Hahe. And then, we kind of just build this network of friends who are doing creative stuff. And, it's all like, I remember 2010, I also really wanted to be on radio. And I'm such a big fan of artists in Kenya, especially non-mainstream artists like the Just a Bands and Dellas and Sauti Soul. And I just was like, there's no radio show that plays the kind of music that I love. And because I go for all these gigs, I heard about a new radio station that was opening that was going to play just African music and Kenyan music. And I remember my friend from Changes was, in charge of recruiting guys. So her name is Piera. So I remember she was going to be the programs controller at this new radio station. So I'm like, Piera, can I come do a sound check, like a voice test? Yeah. I really want to have a radio show here. Da, da, da. But when I got there, they only had room for 2 shows, and they hadn't found a news anchor yet. So I was like, let me audition for the news anchor gig, because you guys are telling me to go, and when they're ready to do the show that I want to do, you guys will call me. I don't think you will. So you need a news anchor? Let me do the voice test for the news anchor. I did that, got the job. So I was a news anchor for a radio station while I was biding my time so that I could host the radio show that I wanted to, which was to play the non-mainstream Kenyan and African artists. I ended up being a news anchor for 2 years on radio, left to go do a musical show in Europe for 3 months. It was called Out of Africa, Safari through Kenya. Yeah. And this was like with a bunch of other Kenyan artists and singers. And so we were away for 3 months. I remember when I left the programs controller then, her name was Olivia Otieno. And I told her, I'd sort of written up 2 ideas for radio shows, right? And I'd sort of given her and even done like sample shows and recorded sample shows for her. So she was like, okay, cool. So you go away, do this show, this musical production thing that you're doing in Europe. When you come back, if you want to come back, we'll be ready for you. That's what she told me. She was like, take the time that you need. We needed like 3 months of rehearsal and then 3 months to go do the show. So I remember leaving 1FM in July of 2012, which is exactly 10 years ago. We rehearsed until September, and then we left, came back in December, of 2012 after doing the show in Europe. And then in January, I go back to 1FM, and Olivia Otieno is no longer the program's controller. The guy that I find is just like, I think you should just do a hits show. Rush hour. It's better, it's better for your career. You'll have more listenership. And I remember thinking, that's great, but that's not what I want to do. And at this point, they'd even started like adding international artists to the mix. So I was like, I'm going to have a show playing Rihanna and Beyonce, who I love, but they already played enough. We can all access Beyonce and Rihanna. I just want to play these artists here in Kenya who deserve to have their airtime that mainstream artists have. So I declined. I said, you know what? I'm okay. It's no longer the place for me. So this is 2013. 2013, I did my first film, which was a short film with this organization called The Nest. It was called Homecoming. It premiered at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival. So now I was dabbling, just doing acting gigs here and there, performances here and there. And then a friend of mine invited me to his radio station called Homeboys to sort of just be a guest on his show and to read out a poem at the end of his show. And while I was there, this was maybe September now of 2013, I did the thing, read the poem, and his boss heard me. So between September to December, somebody at Homeboys kept calling me, asking me, please, we're looking for a news anchor. Could you please just come do a voice test? My boss heard you, and he really wants you to be a news anchor. And I'm like, I'm not trying to do the news again. No, I want to do a radio show. So I finally went to meet with the boss in January of 2014. And we sat, and he's like, I think you'd be a great news anchor here. And I was like, look, I'll do the news if you give me a show. And he's like, okay, what kind of show do you want to do? I want to play this kind of music. Nobody's doing it. These people deserve airtime. And he's like, cool, we have a slot. You can have that slot. So you'll do the news during the week, and then you'll have the weekend slot. And I was like, cool. 6 months into doing the news and doing that show, I was like, I can't keep doing the news. The news is just, it's just depleting my soul.
Yeah.
So I remember going to meet with him, and I told him, look, I've done the news for 6 months. I'm just not enjoying it, but I completely understand if I leave the news and you don't want me to do the radio show anymore. And he said, nah, I was waiting for you to come say that you're not enjoying the news. So it's cool. You can keep doing the show. We'll find someone else to do the news.
It is. It does fascinate me. I mean, you're talking about the music, right? And you talk about this kind of journey, and it's interesting to me how there's certain artists across this continent who it feels like I've had to kind of go through that long haul, but we're finally reaching the place where they're not a Beyonce, they're not a Jay-Z, etc. But at least it feels like they're starting to kind of get the respect.
Right.
You're talking about Sauti Soul, just the band, and it's across the continent. I mean, there's Neka out of Nigeria, Manifest in Ghana. There's this. It feels like a collective or a movement that's also starting to connect.
Yeah.
Across the continent as well as, I guess, internationally. What was it that drew you to that then?
I think it's just music I enjoyed. That's all it was. It's just the music I enjoyed. And I genuinely would seek out such music. So it's not to say that I didn't enjoy anything else, but I also just was a big fan of these, low-key, underground, chill artists, because it's also not necessarily put your hands up in the air and wave if you don't care kind of music. That had its place, but I also just enjoyed the acoustic music, the music that was telling stories. I actually have an Excel sheet of all the artists I played while I was at Afro Central, because I ended up hosting that show for 5.5 years. And the thing that I loved about that show is people would tune in to listen and discover artists that they didn't even know existed. Right? Because I think with the media now, or even before, there was always the you'll play what's popular. You'll play what you think people want to hear. Then you play that over and over, right? So there ended up not being room to play something that's a little bit more chill, a little bit more non-mainstream, because you feel like because it's not popular, you're going to lose your listenership. But there's room for all these artists. How do people get, identified or discovered? There was at some point Sauti Soul was not known. They were not that popular. At some point
the irony is that it's actually a business that's determining what's in inverted commas popular. So
exactly.
it's not even necessarily about the music itself, or let's say the substance of the music itself and how it's created, but it's about a business kind of going, okay, we're going to put attention behind this particular artist with this type of music because of XYZ.
Yeah. So I think for me, it was always just coming from, what is it that I'm missing? If I'm missing this, then I know there's a bunch of people who are missing the same thing. So my radio show, that's what it was about. How do I get people to be able to access these artists? And then eventually, when I started hosting this weekly show called Speaker Box, it was also born out of what's missing in Nairobi. A chance to go listen to an artist playing an acoustic set, and also being able to ask the artist questions while they play. Because I don't know if you know about the festival Blankets and Wine.
Yes, I do.
Blankets and Wine was also Muthoni Drama Queen's solution to a problem of where do we get to come and enjoy these artists in a setting that is big enough to allow people to sort of congregate and commune and enjoy the artists who they love. And it grew out of, it used to be a Friday evening gig at an Ethiopian restaurant that she was hosting. And then the need to expand that space, because the place now started to get really full. So she came up with this idea to have it on a Sunday afternoon. People can come bring their blankets and their own wine and just chill. And it's like a picnic. And then there's artists on stage playing, and it's a live band playing the songs that we're only just, starting to discover. And then Blankets grew into this huge festival that would happen every month or bi-monthly, every 2 months. And then the thing that it was born out of, the intimate gig in a closed setting at night, there wasn't that for a very long time, and I missed it. So I started to host this event where the artists that I play on Afro Central, also because people are asking, where can I watch them play? One of them had like a regular gig that you can go. It was few and far between. An event, Blankets and Wine, they might get to play there. But so that's what Speaker Box then became. But it's also, I wanted people to be able to connect and ask the artist questions and be like, where were you when you wrote this song? Or what was this song about? And I made it so that it's only acoustic, like maybe 2 instruments at most, so that we strip it down and enjoy a nice chill evening. And it was born out of just the need for that. So I feel like also when you asked why I did the things that I did, it was also just finding a solution to a problem or finding a gap and filling that need. Because I knew that if I miss this, or if I want this, or if I'm craving this, there's definitely a bunch of people just like me who would love something like this.
How do you navigate that now? Being in, so it's being in a position where, how do I phrase this? So one of the things that's always fascinated me, because as a writer and having worked in media, I've taken a similar approach in that if I'm interested in something, and I'm interested in something in a particular way, there must be other people out there interested in the same thing. So I will then write about it.
Right.
But it also messes with the mind a little bit, because it's kind of, okay, it's one thing when people say this is what they see in you. But when you sit and kind of go, hey, well, I'm leading the way on this, or I'm a tastemaker in that, it's something that I grapple with kind of internally. Is
Yeah.
that, yeah, okay, I'm gonna go and do this thing because I feel like you know, if I don't do it, nobody's gonna do it, and I think I'm the best person to do it. And then to sit and go, well, you think very highly of yourself because you feel like you're the best person to do it. It's like it's like a little contradiction, or like an internal, like the devil and the angel conversation internally.
Yo, first of all, I would love to one day just be like, I'm the best person for this. I grapple with self-doubt and imposter syndrome so much. And so it's like I really struggle with, and maybe that's why some of the things that I've done, which have done really well, but then I eventually pull back because I also acknowledge that um I guess it gets to a point where you do something so well, the next thing is just to be like, wow, I do this thing really well and nobody else is doing this like me. I don't get to that point. I get to a point where I'm like, okay, let me just pull back because who the hell do I think I am? And then I start grappling with the imposter syndrome, which for me is like such a regular thing. And that has gotten in the way of me achieving a lot of things or fulfill, like doing things for longer than, because I stop. I recognize that I have this habit of not following through on the journey. Like I'll stop at some point because I'm just like, who the hell do I think I am? And, with my ADHD diagnosis last year, I'm only starting to see how it was the ADHD and the anxiety that was also a secondary diagnosis that resulted from the ADHD, and how that has played a part in what you think of yourself, or
Yeah.
what I think of myself, and why, there's so many things that when I start to do it, I do it really well, but then I get to a point of doubt and I stop. And then I'm just spending lots of time castigating myself, sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy of, you see, you didn't even finish this. You didn't even like go the full way because who the hell do you think you are? And I think that's a space I'm in right now, which is part of why I want to take the break and just do an audit of, look, Patricia, you've achieved so much. You've been able to do so much so well. And there's things that I've done that, you know, were born out of my mind, ideas that I had that I did them so well. And the doubt that came had no place. But now that, I can sit and look back and see the ways in which all the things that my mind was sort of dealing with in navigating a neurotypical world as a neurodiverse person,
Mm.
how then do I move forward, trusting myself and trusting that, acknowledging that I'm good at something is not me thinking highly of myself. It's just me honoring the gifts and the talents and the skills that I have at my disposal. And I owe it to myself and to everybody else around me to just fully commit and fully like immerse myself in bringing all those things to life. So yeah, that's part of the reason I'm also taking a break, is just to take an audit and then also figure out what do I want to then return to, and what are the tools that I'll be able to use so that I'm consistent and I keep reminding myself that this is what I should be doing. This is what I want to do and I should be doing. And I owe it to myself and everybody to do it well and to recognize that I do it well and keep growing and learning as I do it, so that as I evolve, I'm just hitting the next level, you know,
Yeah.
as the best version of myself. Yeah.
I think that is the perfect place
Mhm.
to end. And I feel like anything else I'll add to that, anything I'll ask to that is kind of diminishes it to a certain extent. But I think it's a beautiful thing that you've been able to, let's call it, get that diagnosis and start to understand the challenges that you're working against, right? Because that's the what's the first what the first step or second step is, kind of recognition,
Yeah.
um, but also in being able to then figure out the tools that you need to move forward.
Yeah.
You kind of have to know what the situation already is,
Yeah.
which I think is beautiful because at the same time, those of us looking from the outside in can
Mm.
go, Patricia, like you've done some amazing stuff.
Mm.
I just, we just recently met, and since we met, I've been kind of looking at the things that you've done, looking at the things that you're doing, and kind of going, this has a place, and it has a value in let's call it our broader, and I say this more as an African, kind of our broader industry and our broader society in terms of how we start to stake a claim for ourselves,
Yeah.
not just on the continent but globally.
Yeah.
But I could tell you that, till I'm blue in the face, but it needs, all of these things need us to come to that realization on our own.
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest thing, even just from this conversation, what's crystallizing for me is that everything I have done has been born out of recognizing that us as Africans are so dope. Like, we're so amazing. I just loved the music that we were putting out. I loved the books that we were writing. I loved the films and the TV shows that we were creating. And then I just loved us. So even when I then ventured into YouTube or ventured into Instagram, and it was just all about sharing what it is about us that I think is dope with the world. And I wanted, when somebody Googles Nairobi YouTuber, they can find people who are telling stories of a Nairobi that's not, wait, I thought in Africa, all they do is, the kids are sick and they're hungry and it's wars and corruption. There was this lady who came to Kenya some time back, a missionary, and she expressed on her blog how disappointed she was when she got to Nairobi, and, she's seeing tarmac roads and malls, and she was like, where are the kids with the flies in their eyes? And she was so disappointed because God really told her to come here and help us. And she got a lot of flack online from Kenyans, especially because guys were like, you have a blog, so you have the internet. So you could have easily just Googled the Nairobi you're coming. I mean, she was surprised we had an airport. I was like, but you were going to fly here. Where did you think you were going to land? And so it's just born out of wanting to share our dopeness with the rest of the world and also ourselves. So I think knowing that we are amazing, knowing that we have dope stuff, and wanting more people to see that, and not from we're glossing over all the things that we're dealing with as a continent or as countries. No, it's just to say, yes, this is one part of the story. There's so many other stories that you can find that we can tell, and it's not all strife and struggle. And no, we are joyous, happy, creative, frivolous, dope. Like, we just are also experiencing life on our terms, and there's some low moments, there's really high moments, and I think that's what it was born out of. So if we are telling our own stories in that way, they don't all have to be the same stories, but they're all valid stories regardless.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Patricia.
Thank you, Kojo. Thanks for having me.
Cool. The Listen to Your Footsteps podcast is produced by Zebra Culture. If you have ideas of what we can do better, people you'd like us to have a conversation with, or would just like to share a thought, you can email me on info@zebraculture.com. To check out past episodes, go to kojobuffer.com/podcasts. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share with a friend. If you'd like to get a copy of the book, Listen to Your Footsteps, check out kojobuffer.com/book. There are details on the various spaces it's available at. I'd also appreciate it if you could leave a review or comment wherever you listen to your podcasts. Finally, there's the Zebra Culture by Kojo Buffer newsletter, where on a weekly basis, I share a curated list of articles, playlists, videos, etc. that have caught my attention. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it.